iPad Pros are a fascinating cross between a mobile device and an actual computer. And now, Apple actually puts full-on computer processors inside of them. So with a potential upcoming M2 iPad Pro coming out, what do I think would make the perfect version of that product? Let's find out. First off, if you've not heard my mantra before, welcome to my channel. Hopefully we can have some fun today. If you have a need now, buy what you need now. There is always something new and shiny out on the horizon. So waiting for the latest and the greatest is actually a one-way ticket to never getting anything done. Also, I don't work for Apple or have any insider knowledge. This is just what I reasonably would design to make the perfect M2 iPad. Almost said MacBook there. It's like I'm hooked on MacBooks or something. First off, for the way to improve on the M1 iPad Pro, and this is easily the biggest update that needs to happen. And I'm not sure if this is an iPad OS thing or a physical iPad hardware thing. Either way, Apple, you got to fix this. We need a setting inside of this tablet to extend displays and not just duplicate the on-screen display of the iPad if you plug this into an external monitor. You might think that's a silly request. One, you might say, Gary, why even do this at all? And why not just export the screen as it is? Well, gentle viewer, to answer that question, we need to discuss the most important part about technology ever, depending on who you talk to. Probably not me, though. Aspect ratios. Generally speaking, most modern monitors and TVs are in a 16:9 aspect ratio, generally referred to as widescreen. However, the iPad is in a 4:3 aspect ratio. Think old school CRT TVs, and yes, despite my rakish good looks, I'm almost 40 and was definitely around for needing to turn the TV to channel 4 to play Super Mario Brothers. Combine those two ratios together, and when you plug the iPad into an external monitor, you get huge black bars on the side to make up for that. Now, I'm not asking for anything as complicated as Samsung DeX, where when you plug the phone or tablet into a monitor, it essentially turns on like a computer mode. I'm not trying to be super fancy. I'm not asking for anything like that. I'm also not asking for some kind of complicated UI scaling that totally reworks the display when you plug it in. All I want is some kind of extended display option, or even like a dedicated menu page on here that works for widescreen displays so it extends out when plugged in. You can already do this on MacBooks, so I assume the underlying functionality exists in some way, and hopefully it would not be that hard to move it from macOS to iPadOS. And that sounds easy. As a day job software product manager, nothing is ever as simple as the requirements make it sound, but I still think this is the single most important thing Apple needs to overcome in the iPad Pro lineup. It's 2022, and plugging in my iPad to an external display to show pictures or maybe watch TV on the big screen, it's just super awkward that it has those bars on the side. Yes, if you're watching a movie, you can full screen it, but just do that, but with the whole UI. Simple. Dang, that was like 500 words just on the iPad's external screen support. I know not many people will use it, and not that many people probably care, but I care, and it's absurd that it's gone on this long. The next thing I would like to see in a perfect M2 iPad Pro, I would like to see that beautiful display from the 12.9-inch version make its way down to the 11-inch option. If you are not new here, you'll know that I have a preference for smaller tech, and while there is no denying that the giant mini LED screen on this 12.9-inch iPad Pro, it's absolutely one of the most gorgeous displays that you are ever gonna see. But I don't like carrying around such a big tablet. I've always been of the opinion that if I'm gonna carry around something as big and as heavy as the iPad Pro, I might as well just bring my MacBook Air because it's lighter, cheaper, has way better battery life, and has a full computer operating system. However, that's not my opinion on the 11-inch option, and I really like those as a notebook but full productivity replacement machine because it's lighter, smaller, and more easily transportable than a laptop. And yes, that current display it has is fine. It's got ProMotion, it's got that fully laminated display, but this is my perfect iPad, and darn it, I want that full 1:1 contrast ratio and 1600 max nits of brightness for HDR content on my smaller iPad. Watching this video here, watching some B-roll that I put up, you will not be able to see a difference, but you go to an Apple store or other electronic store and put them side to side, and you can absolutely see that fairly substantial jump in quality. Bring that darn jump to the actually useful iPads here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell. Please, Apple, bring it to the actually useful iPad. The next thing I would like to see would be within the processor itself. Much like our discussion during the perfect MacBook Air video, I think what we need out of the M2 processor overall is very similar from what we need in the MacBook to what we need on the iPad. The M1 is already a desktop level processor put in a tablet that can't really use it to its fullest potential. Like, sure, the specs and the benchmarks are impressive, but functionally, What is the difference between the M1 iPad and the A12Z variant from 2020? Essentially nothing. So what I want out of the M2 is efficiency above all else. I don't want more power or more RAM or more vanity metrics. I want the processor to have more efficiency cores, if that's possible. I'm not a chip designer, so I don't actually know, but in typing and reading this YouTube script, just make it all efficiency processors. I think focusing on efficiency over power makes sure that we're staying within acceptable thermal limits, and we're also pushing the existing battery a little farther. Because if I'm one thing, I'm a proponent of battery life, and we should just rebrand the whole darn YouTube channel to talk about battery life and everything. The everyday battery life guy. Boiled right down to it, what I really want is longer battery life, and that's the next thing I would like to see updated on the M2 iPad Pro. I think, and okay, maybe this will catch me some flack in the comments, I think it would be okay with the iPad getting a little thicker to include a bigger battery. You might be, I hear the boo, Gary, boo. I hear everybody booing me right now and trying to get me off the stage. But there is precedence. I didn't just make this up today to become a pariah from a YouTube video. From the iPhone 12 to the iPhone 13, the iPhone got bigger. Apple did this to allow for a total redesign of the internals of the iPhone, giving them not only a more efficient A14 chip, but also a physically larger battery. We can see the payoff of that today, or at least I do, because my 13 Pro Max literally never runs out of battery. Seriously, when we made that accessory video a couple of days ago, I brought my normal charger down here to my little studio in the basement, and I forgot it down here. As I'm laying down to bed, the last thing I want to do is walk all the way down here again, so I didn't even charge my phone one night, and I made it through the entirety of the next day with 30% to spare. That's the kind of thing that I want to see from the iPad Pro. Besides that external display aspect ratio crop thing, the battery life in the iPad Pro is its biggest weakness. My MacBook Air lasts for 18 hours. My iPhone lasts for over 24 hours. My iPad Pro lasts, what, like 8 or 10? Sure, it's fine for what it is, but it's not fine for today as the rest of the Apple ecosystem starts pushing the realms of longevity farther and farther. So long story long, yes, I'm okay with the iPad getting slightly bigger to give a bigger battery life and thus giving me 24 hours of battery life. Truly, that would be the perfect tablet. The next thing I would like to see is a pretty standard update, I think. We talked about the display moving down to the smaller options, but I would also like to see all of the displays have their bezels shrunk as much as possible. The current iPad Pro is already the cornerstone of Apple's design philosophy, but it also is the oldest generation of that updated design. It's time for it to again become the cutting edge leader of the pack and shrink those bezels as much as physically possible. I'm also willing to even have a dreaded notch if we need it. Goodness. If that means we can essentially have a floating piece of glass in front of us, I say bring on the notch. Give us more workspace for the UI, and maybe allow for some more customization of the UI, but that's more of an iPad OS thing, and this is not a perfect iPad OS video. I guess the lines are kind of blurring a bit. We'll talk about that in a future video. I think having more space would also help that external extended display thing too. And yeah, if you haven't noticed, the display for the iPad is one of the best features, and probably like the most important feature, because tablets are basically all screen. So upgrading that gives us a lot of payoff in the tablet itself. And while we're upgrading the outside of the tablet, it's time to move the camera system from the top of portrait mode to the top of landscape mode. Trying to use an iPad as a teleconferencing tool is always weird because the camera is at the weirdest angle imaginable. Looking at the side and up at my nose is not exactly how I prefer to look when I'm talking to clients or brands. I think in a perfect iPad, we would split the difference. The front-facing camera would go to the top of the edge, but the Face ID sensor would stay in place. I find that works perfectly well from where it is, so even if I want to use the iPad in more of a laptop mode, it works perfectly fine, so why mess with what works? But if you want to position the iPad, especially the Pro, as a do-it-all student, office worker, etc. kind of device, you have to move the actual camera into a useful position, because this does not work. It's like making a YouTube video. If you are trying to connect with an audience or your boss or somebody that you're talking to on a camera, you look into the lens because that's you looking at the person. On the iPad, you've got to look way outside of a natural position to get that eye-to-eye connection. You got to change that in the perfect iPad, Apple. And the last thing I would update for my perfect M2 iPad Pro, this is definitely going to be the most out there update, but it's my perfect iPad, so what the heck. I want to see an expanded role for the smart connection on the back. Currently, because of these little dots on the back of the iPad, we get functionality with a range of additional accessories, namely keyboards. But what I want to see are these beefed up into something that can do more things. Specifically, what I would like to see is enough data transfer capabilities that this essentially replaces the need for a dongle or a cable or anything like that to plug into an external device. Imagine this. Let's close our eyes and it's imagining time. You have your iPad with you during the day to take your notes, manage your meetings, and get normal work stuff or school projects done. You get home, you sit down, and you set this into a dock that immediately connects it to your keyboard, mouse, and display, thanks to that extended mode we already implemented earlier. So you now have the power of an actual desktop computer, and this makes it so much easier to transfer between work tasks and home tasks. At this point, it sounds like, Gary, you're just trying to replace a MacBook here. And yeah, maybe for some folks, they wouldn't need a full-on computer in this scenario. Frankly, if I didn't make YouTube videos, I probably would not own a computer. Even back in 2017, before I started my YouTube channel, I was really close to already being computer free and doing all of my work or stuff on a phone anyway. And 5 years later, it's probably easier than ever. I would also love to see this happen because maybe that increased data rate would allow for a whole range of new accessories that I haven't even thought of yet. I'm certainly not the smartest person in the world or anywhere even close to that, but I think making the iPad more of a holistic device that could be more of someone's hub computer, I think that's a better option, and then you can leave the MacBooks for folks that need the oomph and the capabilities of a quote-unquote real computer with a real operating system. But what about you? What are some things that you would like to see out of your perfect M2 iPad Pro? Let me know in the comments below because I'm curious what everybody else would like to see as well. And if you like this video and you want to see what I think the perfect M2 MacBook Air would look like, good news. You can find my video talking about that by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.